In a bustling African village, preparations for Zia's wedding filled the air with excitement. Bright fabrics fluttered in the breeze as the women sang traditional songs, their voices blending with the rhythmic beat of drums. Zia, a young woman with a kind heart and gentle demeanor, stood in her modest hut, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her late mother's bridal jewelry. Each piece carried memories of her mother, who had once whispered dreams of happiness for Zia on a day like this. Her father watched silently from the corner, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. For the first time in years, hope glimmered in his eyes. Zia's marriage to Rashid, the wealthy merchant's son, promised a new beginning for their struggling family. Rashid was known for his affluence and arrogance, but Zia had convinced herself that love could grow from the union, or at least mutual respect. As the sun climbed higher, the villagers gathered in colourful clusters, their laughter and chatter painting the perfect picture of joy. Children darted between adults, stealing sweets, while the elders recounted tales of their own wedding days. Zia stepped out, her beauty drawing murmurs of admiration. She felt a flutter of nerves but masked them with a soft smile. This was the moment she had waited for. But as the hours stretched, and Rashid's arrival seemed endlessly delayed, unease crept into the crowd. Whispers began to spread like wildfire, doubt replacing the earlier cheer. Zia's father, with growing impatience, sent a messenger to Rashid's home. Moments later, the messenger returned, his face pale, clutching a letter in his trembling hands. The crowd fell silent as Zia's father opened the note. His hands shook as he read the cruel words aloud. Rashid had fled the village with another woman. The gasps of shock turned into a murmur of judgment, and Zia's heart shattered with each condemning word. "She must be cursed," one woman whispered. "Poor Rashid must have sensed something was wrong with her," another added. Zia's legs wavered, her vision blurred, but she refused to let herself collapse under the weight of humiliation. She stood tall, her hands clutching the edge of her dress as if holding herself together. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them, determined not to let her pain show. Amid the crowd, a man stood quietly, his eyes fixed on Zia. Disguised in simple clothing, Prince Tahir observed everything with a heavy heart. He had come to the village in search of inspiration, longing to connect with the people of his kingdom. What he found instead was a young woman whose dignity amidst such heartbreak struck him deeply. As the villagers turned away, their pitying glances more cutting than words, Zia walked back to her home, her steps heavy yet deliberate. Tahir watched her disappear, his mind already stirring with thoughts of how he could help the girl whose strength had left an indelible mark on his soul. The days following the disastrous wedding were unbearable for Zia. The once lively hut she called home felt suffocating, its walls echoing the heavy silence between her and her father. He, once her biggest supporter, now avoided her gaze, his disappointment visible in the way his shoulders drooped whenever they crossed paths. "Why couldn't you have done something to stop this shame?" he muttered one night, his voice heavy with bitterness. Zia swallowed the lump in her throat, knowing no answer would ever ease his pain. Outside the house, the village had turned against her. Women who once shared smiles and laughter now crossed the street to avoid her. Men whispered as she walked by, their words sharp and merciless. "Bad luck follows her," they said. "First her mother, now this." Zia tried to ignore them, but the weight of their judgment pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. The nights were the hardest. In the quiet darkness, Zia allowed herself to cry, her tears soaking the pillow she clutched. She replayed the moment Rashid's betrayal was announced, the mocking stares of the villagers burning in her memory. Her dreams of a happy life, of rebuilding her family's honor, were in ruins. But beneath the sorrow, a small ember of resolve burned. She would not let their words define her. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through her window, Zia made a decision. She packed what little she had and told her father she was leaving. "Where will you go?" he asked coldly, his back to her. To find work, she replied, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. He didn't turn around, but she caught the slight sag in his shoulders, as though her departure was both a relief and another blow to his pride. With nothing but a small bundle of belongings, Zia set out for the nearby kingdom. The journey was long and lonely, but each step away from the village felt like shedding a layer of pain. She arrived in the bustling city. Its towering walls and busy streets a stark contrast to the quiet simplicity of her home. Here, no one knew her story. No one whispered about her. It was a chance to start anew. In the heart of the kingdom, Zia found work as a seamstress for a small tailor. She poured herself into her craft, her fingers deftly weaving fabrics into beautiful garments. Her mother had taught her the art of sewing, and now it became her lifeline. As word of her skill spread, customers began to seek her out. Each compliment, each satisfied client was a small victory, a step toward reclaiming her self-worth. Unbeknownst to Zia, Prince Tahir had not forgotten her. The image of the brave girl standing tall amidst humiliation haunted him. He asked discreetly about her, learning bits and pieces of her story. His trusted advisor, however, warned him against getting too involved. "She's a commoner, Your Highness. You have more pressing matters to attend to," the advisor insisted. But Tahir couldn't shake the feeling that Zia was meant for more than the life she had been dealt. One evening, as Tahir walked through the market in disguise, he spotted Zia. She was standing outside the tailor's shop, her face lit by the golden glow of the setting sun. She looked different, stronger, more determined, but the sadness in her eyes lingered. Tahir felt a pull toward her but held back, choosing instead to observe her from a distance. He noticed the way she carried herself, her quiet resilience shining through. It only deepened his admiration for her. Zia, unaware of Tahir's gaze, continued to work tirelessly. The city was a harsh place, and she faced her share of challenges. But for every hurdle, she found a way forward. Slowly, she began to build a life for herself, one stitch at a time. And though the pain of her past still lingered, she found solace in the knowledge that she was no longer the girl defined by a single moment of betrayal. She was becoming something more. Prince Tahir could no longer silence the thoughts of Zia that lingered in his mind. Her quiet strength amidst humiliation had left an impression he couldn't shake. One evening, as he stared out of his palace window, watching the lights of the bustling kingdom below, he made a decision. Disguising himself as a common traveler, he set out to learn more about her and the life she had endured. The journey to Zia's village was eye-opening for Tahir. Though he had heard stories of the struggles faced by the common people, seeing it firsthand made it real. When he arrived at the village, he blended in with the locals, carefully listening to their conversations. It didn't take long for Zia's name to come up, her story still a popular topic of gossip. "She brought shame to her family," a woman whispered. "No wonder Rashid left her." Another villager scoffed. "I heard she left the village after that day." "Good riddance." Tahir's jaw clenched at their harsh words, but he stayed silent, focusing on gathering information. He eventually found himself at Zia's old home, a modest structure that seemed to sag under the weight of time and sorrow. Her father sat outside, his face a reflection of bitterness and weariness. Tahir introduced himself as a traveler passing through and struck up a conversation. As they spoke, the father's words turned sharp. "She was supposed to be our salvation," he said bitterly. "Instead, she brought nothing but humiliation. The whole village saw it. How can I hold my head high now?" Tahir's chest tightened at the man's harshness. "Perhaps you misunderstand her," Tahir said carefully, keeping his tone respectful. "From what I've heard, she showed immense dignity despite the circumstances. That speaks of strength, not shame." The father fell silent for a moment, his gaze distant. Though Tahir kept his identity hidden, his defense of Zia's honor was sincere. He left the village with a clearer understanding of the burdens she had faced, and a stronger determination to help her. Back in the kingdom, Tahir resumed his search. Days later, he spotted her in the bustling marketplace. She was standing by a small stall adorned with vibrant fabrics and beautifully handcrafted dresses. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her hands moved with practiced precision as she adjusted the display. Despite the noise and chaos of the market, she exuded a quiet grace that drew his attention. Tahir approached the stall, keeping his steps deliberate and his demeanor casual. Zia glanced up briefly, her expression guarded. "Good day," he said warmly. "Your work is beautiful. Did you make these yourself?" Zia hesitated before nodding. "Yes, I did. Thank you." He picked up a dress, its intricate embroidery catching the light. "This is exceptional. You must be very skilled." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but there was still caution in her eyes. "It's just something I've done since I was a child," she replied, her voice soft. They spoke for a few more moments, with Tahir asking about her craft and Zia responding politely but cautiously. She had learned to be wary of strangers, especially those who seemed overly kind. Yet, there was something different about this man. He didn't press too hard or ask intrusive questions. He treated her with a respect she wasn't accustomed to. Before leaving, Tahir selected one of her finest dresses. "I'll take this one," he said, handing her the coins without haggling over the price. Zia blinked in surprise. Most customers tried to bargain, but he didn't. "Thank you," she said, her tone sincere. As he walked away with the dress in hand, Tahir's mind was already racing with plans. He couldn't reveal his identity, not yet, but he was determined to find a way to help her rise above her circumstances. She deserved so much more than the life she had been given, and he intended to make sure she got it. Zia's work, once confined to the modest stalls of the marketplace, began to gain recognition. Her intricate designs and vibrant use of colors caught the eye of many in the kingdom. Word spread about the talented seamstress who could turn plain fabric into stunning masterpieces. Nobles, intrigued by the tales of her skill, started visiting her stall, commissioning custom pieces for special occasions. At first, Zia was overwhelmed by the sudden attention. She worked tirelessly, pouring her heart into each creation. Her small workspace became a hub of activity as orders piled up, but she refused to compromise on quality. Every stitch reflected her passion and resilience. The coins she earned helped her afford better materials, allowing her to experiment with more luxurious fabrics and designs. Unbeknownst to her, Prince Tahir was playing a silent role in her success. Deeply moved by her determination and talent, he used his influence discreetly. He recommended her name to trusted figures within the royal circle, ensuring her work reached the right people. One such recommendation landed on the desk of the royal court's event planner, who was organizing the Queen's upcoming grand celebration. A royal messenger soon arrived at Zia's stall, delivering an official summons to the palace. The Queen, impressed by the descriptions of her work, wanted Zia to design dresses for the event. The news left her stunned. She clutched the letter tightly, her mind racing with doubts. Memories of her past humiliation resurfaced, filling her with fear. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough for the royal court? It took her days to muster the courage to accept the invitation. With trembling hands, she prepared her best designs and packed her finest fabrics. On the day of the visit, she wore one of her own creations, a simple yet elegant dress that reflected her style. As she approached the grand palace gates, her heart pounded in her chest. Inside the palace, the grandeur was overwhelming. The high ceilings, sparkling chandeliers, and opulent decor were unlike anything she had ever seen. The court was filled with nobles, all dressed in finery, their curious eyes fixed on her as she entered. Zia kept her gaze steady, forcing herself to remain composed, despite the nerves that threatened to consume her. When she presented her designs to the Queen, a hush fell over the room. Zia explained the inspiration behind each piece, her voice steady but soft. The Queen examined the dresses closely, her expression unreadable. Minutes felt like hours as Zia waited for a response. Finally, the queen smiled. A warm, genuine smile that made Zia's heart leap. "These are extraordinary," the queen said, her voice carrying across the room. "Your creativity and craftsmanship are unparalleled. From this day forward, I would like you to be the royal designer." Zia's breath caught in her throat. The room erupted in polite applause, but she barely heard it. The queen's words echoed in her mind, disbelief and joy mingling together. She bowed deeply, expressing her gratitude, though words felt inadequate to convey the depth of her emotions. Her new role brought her a sense of purpose and confidence she hadn't known before. She worked closely with the royal court, designing gowns that became the talk of the kingdom. Her reputation soared, and the painful whispers of her past were replaced by admiration and respect. Through it all, Prince Tahir watched from the shadows. Disguised as an ordinary noble, he would occasionally visit the court under the pretense of observing the queen's preparations. Each time he saw Zia, his admiration for her grew. She was no longer the girl who had been left at the altar, defined by someone else's betrayal. She had become a woman of strength and talent, carving her own path despite the odds. Though he longed to reveal his identity and express his feelings, Tahir held back. He wanted Zia to rise on her own terms, without the influence of his royal status overshadowing her achievements. Instead, he offered quiet encouragement during their brief interactions, always careful to keep his true identity hidden. One evening, as Zia walked through the palace gardens after a long day of work, she found herself reflecting on her journey. The pain of her past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her. She had built a new life, one that was hers alone. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. Little did she know, the prince who had silently championed her success was waiting for the right moment to step out of the shadows and into her life. The Grand Royal Ball was the most anticipated event of the season, with nobles from across the kingdom gathering in their finest attire. The palace glittered with light, the music echoing through its halls. Zia, now an esteemed royal designer, was among the invited guests. Her presence was highly anticipated, as her gowns had become the symbol of elegance and artistry in the kingdom. Zia arrived wearing a dress she had designed herself, a masterpiece of shimmering gold and emerald hues, inspired by the lush landscapes of her village. As she entered the grand hall, all eyes turned to her. Gasps of admiration filled the room as the crowd parted to make way for her. For the first time in her life, Zia felt like she truly belonged among the nobles. Among the crowd, Prince Tahir stood, watching her with a mix of pride and nervousness. He had waited for this moment, knowing it was time to reveal his true identity. Dressed in regal attire, he was no longer the disguised traveler who had supported her in secret. Tonight, he would step forward as the prince and confront the feelings he had kept hidden. Zia, unaware of what was to come, mingled with the guests, receiving compliments and admiration from everyone she met. The queen herself approached her, praising her talent and grace. Zia was overwhelmed with gratitude, but her heart carried a tinge of nervousness, unsure why the evening felt so significant. As the music paused for an announcement, Prince Tahir stepped forward. His commanding presence silenced the room. Zia froze as her eyes met his, her mind racing as she recognized him, the kind stranger who had encouraged her when she needed it most. "My honored guests," Tahir began, his voice steady and warm. "Tonight, I wish to honor someone whose resilience and talent have inspired not just me, but the entire kingdom. Zia, the royal designer, is not just an artist. She is a symbol of courage and grace. What many of you may not know is that I have had the privilege of witnessing her journey firsthand." The room murmured in surprise as Zia's heart pounded. Tahir's gaze softened as he turned to her. "Zia, I was the traveler who met you in the marketplace. I saw your strength when others doubted you. I admired your determination and knew you were destined for greatness." Zia's breath caught in her throat. She felt a surge of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and a lingering sense of disbelief. The man she thought was a humble traveler was a prince all along. While his words touched her deeply, her past experiences made her cautious. Could she truly trust someone of such high status, especially after what Rashid had done? Before Zia could respond, the grand doors of the ballroom swung open and a familiar voice echoed through the hall. "Zia!" Rashid, her former fiancé, strode in, his face pale and his clothes disheveled. The once proud merchant's son was now a shadow of his former self, having lost his wealth and reputation due to his reckless behavior. The guests whispered in shock as Rashid made his way towards Zia, his eyes filled with desperation. "Zia, I made a mistake," he declared, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "Leaving you was the biggest regret of my life. Please, give me another chance." Zia stood frozen, her heart racing. The memories of her humiliation on her wedding day came rushing back, but before she could respond, Rashid turned to the crowd, his tone changing to one of mockery. "She may look grand now, but don't be fooled. She's just a village girl, a nobody pretending to be one of us." The room fell silent, the atmosphere tense. Rashid smirked, confident he had tarnished her image, but before he could continue, Prince Tahir stepped forward. His voice, firm and commanding, cut through the tension. "Enough." Rashid turned, startled to see the prince addressing him. Tahir's expression was calm but fierce. "How dare you insult a woman who has risen above your betrayal and proven her worth to this kingdom? Zia is not defined by her origins, but by her character, talent, and resilience. Unlike you, she has earned her place here." Rashid stammered, trying to defend himself, but Tahir wasn't finished. "You abandoned her, humiliated her, and now you dare to crawl back, hoping to bask in her success. You are unworthy of her presence, let alone her forgiveness." The crowd erupted in applause, their admiration for the prince growing. Rashid, realizing he had lost, slinked away, his disgrace complete. Zia watched, her emotions a whirlwind of relief and gratitude. For the first time, someone had stood up for her so publicly, and it was none other than the prince. As the ball resumed, Tahir approached Zia, his tone softening. "I'm sorry for revealing everything so suddenly. I only wanted you to know the truth. You don't have to trust me right away, but I hope you'll allow me the chance to earn it." Zia looked into his eyes, seeing sincerity and respect. Though her heart still carried scars, she nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced by the hope of a brighter future. The ballroom was alive with chatter and celebration, but Zia's heart pounded as Rashid approached her once again. His face was a mask of desperation, and for a moment she saw a glimpse of the man she had once hoped to marry. But that hope had been shattered long ago, replaced by pain and betrayal. Rashid fell to his knees before her, his voice trembling. "Zia, I was a fool. I let greed blind me, and I hurt the only person who truly cared for me. Please forgive me. Let me make things right." Zia stood tall, her eyes unwavering as she gazed at him. The room quieted, and all eyes were on her. This was the moment she had dreamed of, not to seek revenge, but to find closure. "You didn't just hurt me, Rashid," she began, her voice steady and strong. "You humiliated me, my family, and left me to pick up the pieces of a life you destroyed. I spent years believing your betrayal was my fault, that I wasn't good enough. But I see now that the shame was never mine. It was yours." Rashid looked up at her, his lips trembling. But Zia continued. "I don't hate you anymore, Rashid. I pity you. You thought abandoning me would bring you happiness, but look where your choices have led you. I've moved on, and I will not let you or anyone else define my worth." The crowd erupted into applause, their admiration for Zia's strength growing with every word. Rashid, humiliated and defeated, lowered his head and quietly left the ballroom. Zia exhaled deeply. feeling a weight lift from her heart. For the first time, she truly felt free. The queen, who had been observing the scene from her royal seat, stood and approached Zia with a warm smile. "Zia, your strength and grace are remarkable. You've inspired this court tonight, not just with your talent, but with your courage. I would be honored if you would accept a place of honor here, not only as the royal designer, but as a symbol of resilience for our kingdom." Tears welled in Zia's eyes as she curtsied. "Your Majesty, I am humbled by your kindness. I will do my best to serve this kingdom with my work and my heart." The queen embraced her, and the room erupted into cheers once more. Zia's journey, from a humiliated village girl to a celebrated royal figure, had come full circle. Yet, the evening held one more surprise. As the music resumed, Prince Tahir approached Zia, his expression tender. He extended a hand toward her, and the room fell silent once again. "Zia," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "From the moment I saw you, I admired your strength, your kindness, and your ability to rise above every challenge life threw at you. You've taught me what true resilience and grace look like." Zia's breath caught in her throat as Tahir knelt before her, holding out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate ring, adorned with a single emerald that mirrored the color of her dress. "I am not standing here as a prince," he continued, "but as a man who has fallen in love with the incredible person you are. Zia, will you allow me the honor of standing by your side, not to complete you, but to support you, as you've already completed yourself?" The room held its collective breath as Zia stared at the man who had believed in her when no one else did. Her heart, once shattered, now felt whole. She smiled softly, her voice steady as she replied, "I will accept, Tahir, but only if you promise to always see me for who I truly am, a village girl who found her own way." Tahir laughed, a sound filled with relief and joy. "I wouldn't want it any other way." He slid the ring onto her finger, and the room erupted into cheers. The queen beamed, the nobles clapped, and Zia's family, watching from the sidelines, wiped tears of pride from their eyes. Zia and Tahir stood together, not as a prince and a commoner, but as two equals who had found strength in each other. As the evening drew to a close, Zia stood on the palace balcony, gazing out at the stars. Tahir joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "Are you ready for the next chapter of your life?" he asked, his voice soft. Zia smiled, her heart filled with hope. "I am, but this time I'm writing the story." And so, under the starlit sky, Zia's redemption was complete. A story of strength, love, and triumph that would inspire generations to come.